Welcome everyone. It's good to have you back to the first talk of the year. We're kicking off with a bang this year. I hope you're all excited. We've got Prof. Gardiner here. So before we start, just to start with the ground rules again. Please obviously ask questions at the end. And then also just one note, big thanks to the bar, Thirsty Giraffe, thanks to the team who helped set this up. There's a few of us stragglers around here, so if you see anyone, lots of you know who they are, just say hello and thanks. I'm not going to hang around too long. I'm going to pass it on to Prof. Gardiner. He's the head of the Applied Learning Unit at the Southern African Wildlife College, and he's an expert with decades of experience in lepidopterans, so butterflies, but also scarabs, so your beetles. But I'm going to let him tackle all the details. So I'm going to hand over now. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Evening, everybody. Just do let me know if something is unclear. I normally break that first rule, so I'm not too worried about it, but we'll try and keep a flow to it anyway. But please, if I'm not making myself clear, something is misunderstanding, just let me know. So, butterflies. Yeah, this here is a butterfly. Okay? But we tend not to think of them in that form, because we used to, when you say butterfly, you're thinking of something with wings. But this is the caterpillar. And of course it spends most of its time as either a caterpillar or pupa. So in fact, this winged stage, oh jeez, am I doing something wrong? So the winged stage is actually quite short in comparison to the rest of the stages. So that's why this butterfly, if I actually flip to the next stage, that's what it actually turns into. And this is a butterfly called Iolaus lelua. And we're fortunate we have some good references in South Africa. One of them is a book that was produced by Sanby. I don't know if it's standing this way or this way.
If you touch it if you hold the microphone on your chin, then it'll pass on the right.
Okay, does that do it?
Then we can turn it down.
Okay, I feel like I've just misplaced an ice cream.
Yes, right enough.
Okay, how's that? Yeah, that sounds a bit better. Huh? Okay, so you can see there's a very nice reference done by Sanby and the amateur lepidopterists of South Africa. And they produced a book, and for all the South African butterflies, they've provided a distribution map and giving details of its conservation status. So it's a really useful reference already to have, especially if you're in conservation. And this is the adult of that larva, and as you can see, very limited distribution in South Africa, and then recently we found that it actually occurs in Mozambique. So it was considered a South African endemic, but in fact it just penetrates South Africa from Mozambique. So what is happening to our environment? Okay, most of the changes, you hear a hell of a lot about climate change, but in fact still the main factors are direct human activities. So that's really what is affecting us. And you know, a lot of the stuff I'm going to begin with, I'm sure you all know about. Also, I'm probably, I'm quite wide with my respect to nature. So I enjoy all things, because you might get the wrong thought a little bit later in the talk. And of course, habitat destruction is a big factor. And there's lots of reasons for that, from overgrazing, agriculture, we're removing so much water. We're fortunate at the moment we're getting all this water on us, but South Africa is water deficit, so it loses water each year, so we've got a problem with water most of the time. And of course you can see just the runoff that's happening, and there's reasons, human induced reasons for all that runoff, and that of course impacts everything, because if you get less going into the ground, you're getting less available for other things, including your plants, which of course affect your butterflies, affect everything. There's degradation of water quality, acidification, and then also invasion of exotic species. So, you know, I stay up in Campus Rus, and there's a hell of a lot of things like lantana, and it has an impact. So there's a lot of things that are busy taking place, and then on top of that, there is also climatic factors. So in fact, that's a picture out the aircraft on the way to Joburg, and you can hardly see the ground. It's a clear day, but it's the fog as you're coming in towards Joburg. And so these are all factors. So you've already got isolated populations, because the refugia has been broken up now for your various species. So you have little pockets of areas of vegetation where things can survive. And then on top of that, you've got problems with climate changing as well. Oh, I don't know if I should speak without this. Can you hear me? No. Oh. Okay, because my chin just doesn't seem to do a trick. Okay. So that is an additional problem that we've got. And of course, climate is also affected by elevation. We know just going up a mountain, it's got a very different climate than up. So climate and altitude are interrelated. And then on top of that, you've got all those environmental factors such as fields, agriculture, etc. So we're getting to quite a key stage in the survival of species. And so some of the questions we should be asking, and sometimes we forget to ask, are we losing species? And are we able to do something about it? Okay, so firstly, you've got to know if you're losing things. And then what do we do about it? And for instance, this butterfly here, last seen in 1863, okay, from the Bashi River mouth. So that's the last time that has been seen. And this could be happening more and more often. There's another species now which I could possibly add to that list, but it's got to have not been seen for a certain number of years, and that's Orochrysops niobe, or people know it as the Brenton blue. Okay, and that hasn't been seen now for, I think it's the last 4 years now. Okay, so it could add to the list, and that list is going to continue. So, as I mentioned, a sustainable population, it requires different areas to go to. And if you keep areas, the likelihood of it being to survive is going to decrease. It just runs out of places that it can cope with, because this year, maybe there was good rains here and poor rains up there. Where there was poor rains, the population decreases. Where it was good, it increases. But at least it had the two places. Now, if you remove the one and only had the one place and it's a bad year there, then it's gone. So that type of thing starts to take place. And in fact, whenever I fly between Hoedspruit and Joburg, it's just frightening as soon as you go over the escarpment. In fact, even below the escarpment it starts. And that's the picture almost continuously the way. And we unfortunately are doing it everywhere in our own environment. What's going to happen? We are not seeing what is happening? Because we really are. We seem to be concerned with a few species which are no ways near endangered. There's absolutely no way the charismatic large mammals are endangered. I know there's more lions in Texas than there is in Africa. So how can it be endangered? Okay? And the only time it will be endangered is when its habitat is gone. So it's endangered in the wild, if the habitat goes. But not one of those species is likely to become extinct. And yet here we are losing species. So how can we let species go extinct? And this is what's happening here in our own area, where we're having developments taking place, and a plot for housing in an area which should be healthy and diverse, and you end up with this type of story. We lose whole systems. If we lose whole systems, we're going to lose species. If we are serious then about species loss, we've got to make certain management decisions. But if we're not serious, if we're not worried about it, then don't worry. Okay, let's just go for the income generating species at the moment. And I say at the moment because there are many of these species could be income generators. A healthy system is healthy for everybody. That, I think if we're all in conservation, I think we all agree with that. I don't think anybody, that's nothing new. If you've got a good, healthy system, it is good for you. If you take away the health of a system, you're going to get problems, human problems, and we know that's what happens. Disease, etc. You take away good water health, you've got problems. So butterflies can be an indicator of the health of systems just by the number of species and the number of each of the species. If you go around and you see a good butterfly population, you know the system is functioning right. You've got a problem. And in the not too long term, these are going to be serious factors. And in the next 60 years, and it's already happening in Europe. Okay. Then I go back to a very old depiction, a speciescape. I think, how many of you have seen a speciescape or know of a speciescape? Okay, this is a drawing which was done probably first about 40 or 50 years ago, and now it's got many modifications, so it's been repeated a lot. I think the original one had a fly, and the size of the group indicates the number of species in that group. Okay, so you can see here, oh, the pointer's not working. Oh, there. I've got to be at an angle. It doesn't work on the screen. Okay, so so you can see that beetle. That's an indication of the number of species of insects. And you can see the various groups, a hell of a lot of arachnids as well. Plants is quite well represented. And then you get to the vertebrates, and which include the mammals there, the mammals, and the mammals in particular are there. So they're the tiny inner elephant. And in fact, what would have happened since 40 years ago is the size of the beetle would have increased even more. And the others, especially the mammal one, would have remained pretty much the same. Maybe a handful of species added, whereas I know the expectations, the Lepidoptera, for instance, they thought there was like 20,000 and it's over 60,000. So, and Lepidoptera is not one of the big groups of the invertebrates. So there's a hell of a lot of species in the invertebrates. And like most invertebrates, they have very significant ecological functions. And that's why I put that caterpillar as my first slide, because they are herbivores. So again, we don't think of butterflies as herbivores, but most Lepidoptera, including the butterflies, eat plants. And here's an example of one that is quite common in this area, particularly along the rivers. And this is the caterpillar. You can see its head shield there. So that's the front. And when you look at these things, they're actually also spectacular. They've just got amazing ornaments and incredibly diverse. You can see the difference between that first picture and this, how different those larvae are. And this one has got also incredible camouflage because it's broken its body up with those stripes, so it's on the acacias and with the small leaflets, it blends in very well. And then what we do tend to recognize butterflies for is their role in pollination. And they are very important. A lot of your day flowers with bright colors, especially the reds, are pollinated by butterflies. And some of them are specifically pollinated, so your orchids. Some of you will know the dizers, which tend to be quite spectacular orchids. And the red ones are normally pollinated by a butterfly. And in this case, you've got this acreo butterfly here, this one, and at the end of the abdomen, those are all the pollen sacs of the orchid. So orchid has become very specially adapted to certain pollination. And in the flower, here's the pollen sacs. And so the orchid puts a lot of pollen into one sac because it's relying on a specific pollinator. So when the butterfly comes along, it's aimed for this area, its abdomen touches here, and that glues on to that part of the insect. So that pollen sac is like a glue pad at the end, and thump, it's stuck onto the insect. And here's another species with the pollen sacs of it. It will be a different orchid, a different species, which is targeting this butterfly. And here, it's placed it on the proboscis. And it's specifically placed so that once it pulls off, that pollen sac then hangs down, and when it flies to another flower, it hits the female part of the flower, the stigma, and transfers the pollen onto it. So when you lose a species, you can be losing many other things. You lose that butterfly species, you lose that orchid as well. So it's a knock-on effect, and a number of things end up being lost. Another example, what's more commonly known is the mountain beauty. And it's common along all the mountains from the Cape Town, right into the eastern districts of Zimbabwe. And many of your red flowers on the mountains rely on this butterfly. So the dizer in the Cape it relies on this butterfly for pollination. And here, the cnophias, they rely on pollination from it as well. So, another reason for looking and why we should be conserving and looking at butterflies is that they can be important for scientific research as well. The thing with your butterflies is you can collect data relatively easily compared to many other groups. Because there's lots of them and they're relatively easy to identify. They have given us amazing colors and patterns. And we are able now to have a good classification of them, which just doesn't happen for many of the other invertebrates. Your beetles, dung beetles, many of them are actually very difficult to identify to the species level. And fortunately, through the efforts of amateurs, we've got a good idea of their distribution. So it's a bit like birds, where it's been pushed along by the amateurs. But unlike birds, it hasn't been taken up by the scientific community. So I'm going to touch on that again just now. And very good monitoring methods have been developed for them. So a lot of work has been done. And I'm touching on this on a point which I'll bring up again later. I'll just pass through it when I get to it there. But work in Europe, so much work has been done on using butterflies to measure what's happening with the climate and the loss that is taking place. And that's really what's been ringing the bells for scientists and getting people moving there about, look, we've got to do something. That hasn't got to our realization here for some instance yet. We're going to be changing the most out of any continent. Just another example of a species that comes out at a specific time of the year, and it occurs here on the top of Mariepskorp. So you get it there. And if you go out there, it's one of the first butterflies to come out in the season. So if you go out there in August, you will see this butterfly. It's still quite cool and chilly on the top of Mariepskorp, and this butterfly is out flying. So it's an ideal candidate for studying things like what's happening to the climate. Because if it's going to change, it's going to affect these species first. And then butterflies are charismatic. Just whenever I go past a shop or somewhere, Joburg, wherever, there's a butterfly displayed as a picture somewhere. Now, I just don't know why we don't use them more. And they offer so much in education benefits. In fact, who didn't learn about metamorphosis at school? And butterflies were used as the example. I think at school, your standard thing. So they've been key, in fact, for teaching us how things change, how things develop. And I still get amazement every time I watch something hatch out of a pupa. You can never not enjoy it. And you get your end product at the end. And this is the African monarch, which I hope a lot of you know. It is common throughout Africa, and it breeds on the milkweeds. So that's one of the reasons why it's got such a widespread distribution. On all other continents, butterflies are used heavily as a tourism and to promote tourism. And I just also don't understand this on our doorstep. It's right here, just behind us. And yet nobody uses it in tourism. Or very, very little. I know of one case. So. And this is an example. I just took this straight. I just immediately just Googled butterfly tourism. This one came up straight away, which is for 2023 in Costa Rica, and where you can go through guided walks, getting, and people really engaging you with the environment. And a lot of tourists, that's what they're looking for today. They actually want engagement. They can see the big five, and after that, they're finished with it. They've got the photo, that's it. So if you can engage with your tourists, you can keep them entertained for longer. If you can keep them entertained for longer, you've got more bed nights. And I think one of the disadvantages is this perception we got that they're actually not a scientific group. And this painting was done in 1840, and it was probably one of the first signals that gave that message, that these weirdos with little nets that run around the bush looking and trying to catch butterflies. And that has what stayed. Even when I speak to scientists today in South Africa, when I go overseas, it's a different situation. But yeah, when I speak to people and I mention talking about butterflies, I sort of start to feel a bit embarrassed. And it's because of this perception. That's my only thing I can think of. Why is it that in the whole of South Africa, none of the universities, in fact, none of the museums have a butterfly expert and an ecologist with butterflies? Why? It seems rather strange when you've got probably about 400 on one species, such as an elephant, whereas you've got 700 species of butterfly and we don't have one person working on it. So they're often perceived as non-wildlife by many wildlife practitioners. And the knowledge of the group by wildlife users is generally poor. So this is why I said you might not like me halfway through the talk. But if I ask people what butterfly that is, when I'm with a group of people in the bush, very few can tell me, yet they can tell me what bird that is. So I think it is time that we broaden what we look at. Do we actually know what is around us? Do we know what this is? Apart from the people that a couple of people I know, like Albi, he knows what it is. And Annette, I think, knows what it is. Okay, that is Caraxes reeps. It is named after our own mountain here. Yeah. And that was where it was known to be endemic for a long time. And it is a little bit more widely distributed than they originally thought. And you can see the distribution map. And there's the fantastic distribution of that species. So we're sitting in a situation where we've got this special thing on the back of our doorstep. We've got these type of beauties. Aphnius hutchinsoni. Again, you've just got to know where to look for them and how to look for them. But they are spectacular things. And they've got incredibly interesting. Each butterfly has a different type of strategy in its life history. It's caterpillar. So on the right there is actually the caterpillar. And you will see it's got a couple of ants on it. Because these caterpillars have special little glands at the back of them. And when the ants touch those glands, it sends out a little brush with sugar on it. It says, here we are, have some sweetie. And that keeps the ants there, so they feed it. It keeps the ants there so that they get protected from other things that would eat them. So there's all sorts of interesting life history strategies that goes on with these things. And that caterpillar actually lives, that picture is actually taken with a flash because it stays in the branches during the day with the ants, and then it comes out with its group of ants during the night and feeds on the leaves and then goes back during the day. And that's the distribution of Aphnius hutchinsoni. You can see here we're in a good area for it. It's quite widely distributed, but few people see that spectacular thing. And you can imagine what it looks like in life. Because always you see these things on a picture, it doesn't do it any justice. Another one we've got close to us is another funny little butterfly called Aloides nubilis. Its distribution is also very limited, just above the escarpment here. If you know the Robbers Pass sort of area, that's where this species occur. And even if you look at their eggs, you can see they've got amazing patterns. So that's a little egg. That egg is about half the size of a pinhead. So it's small, but it's got incredible patterns to it. And that's the species in its natural habitat up in the grasslands. So you know if something happens to those grasslands, you knock out that species, and you can see how limited its distribution is. And again, so the larvae of those also live with the ants. They also come out at night, and then they pupate underground. So this is actually pupa of the butterfly underground, and there it is being attended to by ants. So the ants are looking after it all the time, cleaning it, making sure no fungus grows on it or anything like that. And then the butterfly will hatch out, crawl to the top, find a twig, pump its wings, and off it goes. And this is Aloides damarensis, which you get right here in the gardens here. So how do we influence and manage what is around us? And I just want to illustrate how our management decisions have a major influence on what happens. And this is a group of species which belongs to the caper family. So Caperaceae, if you've probably got some capers in the back there that you're putting on the pizza. Well, this species, Caparus tamentosa, is exceedingly closely related to the caper. I'm sure if you pickled it, it would taste the same. So nobody's just done it. So Caparus tamentosa, you will see a lot of it around, especially up against the mountain, but also many parts of Kruger and many of the dry areas. There's Caparus fascicularis, so there's Marua, Yunsia. These are all species within this one family. And within this family, you get a number of butterfly species that breed on it. So that's why it's the caterpillars again. That's what's important. The caterpillars need the food plant. And so this whole group of butterflies, the Balanois or the whites, the Perids, you've got here Balanois guidica, Balanois aorta, Balanois creona. They all occur here. And in fact, this one you all will know. Because this is the one that hits the headlines. This is the migrant group that you see flying, and there's probably a migration coming in the next weeks because the populations are building up in the west side of the country, and so we'll probably get, especially with the rains now that happen, we'll probably get a nice migration again. So all of those species, all of these species, all these beauties here, this one here, that's just it's hanging off its pupa. It's just hatched out of the pupa, and is hanging there drying. So all of these species here also, just to show you the difference that often happens between male and female, like with the birds. That's a male, that's a female. This is a male, that's a female it's the same species. So this is the same species, male, female. So those calotus, and we continue all these species, again, male and female. On the right, they're male at the top, female at the bottom. All of these species, they all breed on the caper family. All of these as well. Calotus ione, which has got also amazing differences in the different forms of females that you get. So that one on the right and this one on the bottom left, so top right and bottom left, those are females of Calotus ione. Same species, just different forms, two female forms of the same species, and then the male on the top left. So it looks completely different. And then a different species, and that females of that species also have different female forms, the Calotus regina. Now I stopped illustrating all the Calotus because there's more of them, and they all breed on the Caparaceae. So what I looked at was, we've got a little, what could be called a little experiment at the college, where the campus of the college has got a fence around it, which is the black line, and that's the campus. Outside the campus is your wildlife area. So your wildlife is excluded from the campus. And what I did was to go through the campus marking all the Caparaceae. So all those green stars and all the red dots and the one blue one, that's 3 species of Caparaceae that occurred on the campus. Then I went outside the campus, and if you look carefully, you'll see like there's some lines that sort of circle the campus a bit, especially on the right side. And those were indicators of distance and area. And so we went on the outside and really searched for Caparaceae. And what did we find? Nothing. Yeah? So that was a very detailed search. Then I thought, well, I'm not going to search the whole of Kempiana, which is a huge area, kilometers square. Let's just put it out there for the guides to look for these species. And what they came up with was, this is the gate, if you've ever been on the Orpen Road, and I'm sure all of you have. This is the entrance to the college here, where that one red and one brown dot are. At the entrance of the gate were 2 species of Caparaceae, and those were the only ones that could be found. So there was some Caparus tomentosa and Marua angolensis at the gate. And I thought, shit, that's quite interesting. Why at the gate? And it's because there's guards at the gate. Well, something's got something to do with me being there. Okay, let's go this side. So you can see the whole of that area. Nobody spotted any other Caparaceae. And yet, in the campus grounds, you've got that. Now, you couldn't be any more clear what's going on. Okay? It's because of the mega or the large herbivores, not the mega herbivores, because they're not mega herbivores, they're just big herbivores. Make you think a little bit there. So the large herbivores, the big mammals, have impacted the Caparaceae outside the college, because inside they can't get to, and has allowed the Caparaceae to remain and grow inside the college. So all those species I showed you earlier, and when you walk around the college, you'll see them flying around. You go outside, you hardly see any. And it's because the Caparace, their food plant, is gone. So, what have we done here? For most of the area, we've destroyed a whole lot of species. Okay, so it's a difficult one, isn't it? Or is it? What are we looking at? So we've got to really see that there's many things we have to look after. What does health of a system actually mean? What do we want lots of species or do we want a few species? What are you aiming for? And that's the thing. If you're aiming income, then don't worry about the species at the moment. But like I say, in the end, if you don't have a healthy system, it's going to impact us. That's going to bite us in the end. So this was put out in 1988, okay, because that's why I say overseas they've been looking at this for a long, long time and have been very worried. Here, this could be in the newspaper tomorrow and it would be like, okay, yeah, maybe we need to start to do something. And yet, over 40 years ago, that was already published. And the problem is that in many countries in the world, we have lost thousands of insects species. They've gone, never seen again. So, I had to have a giggle when I saw the flyer. So you ever made it. But I think you get my point with the budgie. Okay. So that's the thing. We do need to invoke an interest in them and get to know them. Get to know the other things. Because it's going to be around our own environments that we can make a difference. And I'm going to leave it there. So if you would like to ask me some questions, that would be great. Thanks. As if I stunned everybody. Or... Yo!
Hi, thank you for this. It's amazing. Do you have any courses going on butterflies?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. You know, it's something that we definitely should start.
In Pretoria, there's that Rademeyers, and they sometimes have like an insect day there, and the public can join, and you know they've got an expert that helps them to identify what they're looking at.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be a course, but you know.
No, there's actually especially Joburg, Pretoria, Durban. There's what's really an insect day, where people get involved, and it is a lot of people get together to try and show the public what's happening with the insects and what diversity there is. And you know, so I think there are bits and pieces happening, but I think there's just so much more that we can do. As I say, you know, you always wonder, should you do a butterfly course? Because you're already feeling, what, you know, that thing that, oh, it's not the same as doing an elephant course.
I think that honestly, I thought me and my students are going to be the only people here. There's obviously a lot of people that are interested in it. I'm sure you're going to have quite a group if you have a...
Yeah, you know, and there is so much that happens with them. I haven't really touched, I've just glanced at things here. But they are incredibly diverse. So you've got predatory ones as well. So they're not only herbivores, but some of the caterpillars are predatory. And I probably went past it. There was a picture there, which I didn't point to, of one being fed by ants. So it actually goes with the ant's nest, and then it has an interaction with the ant, and then the ant regurgitates some liquid, and the caterpillar eats that liquid. So there's all sorts of things. And I think also just what we can do within our own environments, you know, in our own gardens, if it's a garden, or our own conservation area. Even a garden within a conservation area can become, like you've seen there at the college, an area of increased diversity and a special habitat for other things. So, you know, planting, keeping the food plants, making sure the exotics are out, and this change in mindset of a garden is exotics. Instead, a garden should be for butterflies and everything else. And so planting of food plants. And our natural vegetation is spectacular. And it flowers at different times. Each time I go into the garden, there's something different flowering. And all that, and they all are food plants for something else. So it all adds up. And, you know, I think that type of thing, you know, just sharing with people how you can increase the diversity in a garden and how you can change a garden from being this desert, in a green desert, into something that's really productive. Yep.
I don't know anything about butterflies, but have you seen any directional selection, like evolution, like the pepper moths in the UK, or has there been enough time to study that in South Africa?
So there's probably been nobody looking at it, and there will have been selection factors within a species like that, I'm sure. You know, so many of these species have that many forms. So depending on the environment, it's going to be selected depending on the predators. Because, you know, you just brought up another thing, is that the caterpillars are food. So all your insectivorous birds and everything, so if you're breeding, have a garden with more butterflies, you're actually going to increase your insectivorous birds. So, you know, that's why when people say, oh shit man, my caterpillars are eating my plants, I go, well, that's good. It means you're actually on the right track. And, you know, because these things something will come along and see, oh, there's some food for me. And so it's all part. And keeping those, there will be a balance. And you see it with mopani worms. So they're not butterflies, but they're night butterflies. And you will see if you're in a mopani area how those caterpillars can consume that whole area. So they're major herbivores. And people have calculated that they produce more dung than the entire elephant population in Kruger in one season. And so that was just for an area near Messina. So but those trees, they respond amazingly quickly after they've been grazed by the caterpillars. Within 2 weeks, they've resprouted. 3 weeks, you'll hardly notice that those caterpillars have been there. So that recycling that's taking place and everything, making that a really active area, all of that happens with the caterpillar. So I got a bit sidetracked, but thanks.
Let us talk about migration. Do the butterflies lay the eggs before they migrate, or do they migrate and then lay eggs?
So they will lay their eggs on the way.
On the way.
Yeah. So females will stop and lay eggs, so they're laying as they go. And that's the thing. There isn't. It's a migration. It's a proper migration, but often because with vertebrates, migration is going somewhere and coming back. That's how it's termed in vertebrates. In invertebrates, a migration is a movement, and there doesn't have to be a movement back by that same individual. But there can be movement back, which is the case with this butterfly, the American monarch. That's why I put the budgie there, just in case nobody got it. With the American monarch, it flies from North America down to Mexico, and that area goes, thousands of kilometers. It breeds, and then the offspring go back the opposite way. With our butterflies, that doesn't happen. They often just die, and there's always a population left at the origin which builds up again. But it allows still that huge dispersal to take place because they graze all their plants where they originated from. Yep.
I was observing some plants in front of my house with African monarchs in particular and a few others, painted ladies I think, going onto them, and I looked them up, and they don't actually use it for a nectar, but it's vital for an alkaloid that produces a sex pheromone without which they cannot breed. So there's the milkweed that they use for nectar, and there's the string of the common name, what's it, Helios or something or other, or the forget-me-not, common forget-me-not. The African monarch, among others, needs this not just for nectar, but needs this as the aphrodisiac in shade.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. Now that whole group, so that whole milkweed group, here you also, especially when you go up towards the mountain, you get the Morris, which are the black and white ones. But when I say black and white, the problem is there's other black and white ones also. Because there's all the mimicry stuff that goes on as well. Because all of those, they actually do. They find alkaloids from other plants, that whole group. And often you will see them sitting in bunches on another plant. And that's what they're doing. They're collecting these alkaloids. So, and then they collect and store them and get the right concentrations. Because they've got to get it to the right concentration. All right. Yes.
Is there a really good taxonomic textbook like Bolton for Ants that has caterpillars as well?
So the caterpillars is the missing thing with the butterflies. So the textbooks that are available, and in fact the app, which is also great, doesn't have the caterpillars. There is the caterpillar rearing group, which is now keeping an amazing record of the caterpillars of all the Lepidoptera. And you'll know a person that's contributed amazing to that is Ian Sharp, well, the Sharp family. They've done amazing amount of breeding of caterpillars, and many other people now in South Africa. So a lot of people are beginning, and it's sort of like a citizen thing now, to take photographs and keep them until the adult, take a picture of the adult and then release it. And then the specialists identify, but now they've got the caterpillar. And very soon we hope there's going to be a book coming out which has the moths and their caterpillars. We've been waiting for that book for a couple of years, but hopefully it will be out soon. And we really we need to look at doing the same with the butterflies and the caterpillars. Yep.
Is there any data on what's happening with couple
Sorry, I couldn't hear that one. Oh, something I know very little about. All I know is that they do seem to be spreading, and they are moving around, and they probably will spread everywhere. It's probably going to be something that we're going to have to see how to manage, but these species can have huge impacts. It's the same, the Cape has got a lot of problems with many exotics because that's the port of entry of a lot of these things. The same that happens a bit around Durban as well, but Cape Town's got a long history of things being brought in and has caused major problems. So yeah, that's probably a problem that's not going to go away. And yeah, so you know, yeah, I really, they're probably going to have a lot of people looking at that to see if what can be done. Oh, sorry?
What is the name of the app you mentioned?
Oh, so it's the Butterflies of South Africa, Steve Woodall's Butterflies of South Africa. It's a very nice app. It's got all the species, so it is a proper guide. because initially often the butterfly guides didn't cover all the species. This one, it covers all of them. So it's a great app to have. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what 3 or which plants would you recommend putting in your garden that it's easy to come by, indigenous plants for caterpillars and butterflies?
Yeah, so in this area, things like those Caparaceae are actually perfect. They're naturally occurring here. They're actually quite easy to germinate yourself as well. Those seeds, what I found is that if you put them in the soil straight away, when they're fresh, they germinate like that. If you leave them for a week or 2, they don't. So, so that's a great one. Around here we get things like your adenias, not adenium, which is your impala lily, but adenia, which belongs to the granadilla family. So that group of plants and a lot of the red butterflies, they feed on that. Then you've got the, unfortunately, common names I can't remember. I find the Latin ones easier because they're less confusing than the common names, like the African monarch now being called the tiger. So that's why you would have seen, I tend to keep away because common names can be very confusing. But in the garden, there's a group of plants called acanthaceae, which people often pull them out of their grass, and yet they're the food plant of Genonias, what are the common name? Pansies. For the pansies that you see in the garden. That's actually why they're in the garden, is because they breed on what are called weeds, but they're indigenous plants, and people often pull them out to let the exotic grass grow. So you just change that around, and you have your acanthaceae, which actually produce beautiful little flowers as well as the butterflies, and a whole lot that happens with them. Yeah. What I can try and do is to put a list together, if people would like that, a list of species that you can easily propagate in your gardens here. Great.
It might be a good idea to have at the nursery a section that's like butterfly friendly.
Exactly. So in fact, we spoke to the guys down at the other side of Hoedspruit, where the monthly market used to be. They've got that nursery there, and they were very keen on doing that. And in fact, I think they started a little bit on that. So I think and spreading the word, because I think a lot of us here are inclined that way, and then your neighbor just goes the opposite. And but if we can show them, I think that's also the thing, just spreading it like that. And you will be amazed what difference you can see in a couple of years in a garden. And to me, I just like to sit there and watch all these things go by. And we're so fortunate in some of the places we live because it's naturally like that. So let's keep it like that and just promote it more. Right. Good. Anything else? I think we're keen on the beers. But I think we've got to sort of go in waves. Eh? Great. Thanks.